it's a big family experience. So I think, I think about it as not just building a company, but building a family, and a family of clients, a family of team members, a family that, can count on each other through thick and thin.
Benefits matter. How about let's start there? With everything that happened last year, suddenly employee benefits were not just something that people took for granted, but absolutely needed. And that really fits in with our overall purpose, which is that our purpose is to be a change agent in the healthcare ecosystem. We create technology that helps companies and communities improve their well-being, transforming the annual enrollment event into a personalized journey. Right benefits, right value, right care, right place, and right time. And that drives everything that we do. And we're excited that we're able to help our clients showcase the employee benefits that they offer to their employees.
Technology adds so much to our everyday lives. But with convenience comes risk. Personal data is tracked, analyzed, and sold online, creating new opportunities for identity thieves. Consumers want more control over their data. Allstate has been protecting families for over 85 years. Now, with Allstate Identity Protection, we're helping you look after your online privacy. Our digital footprint tool lets you see who you've shared personal data with and where it may be exposed online. We also monitor the dark web and your social media accounts. If identity theft occurs, we're here 24/7 to help. And with up to $1 million of reimbursement, your identity is in good hands. So get ready for the next generation of identity and privacy protection.
Wait, that's not your kid.
The Aflac duck is just covering for Sophie. Same way you got me money to help cover her hospital bill when my health insurance didn't pay for all of it.
But this isn't fair.
That's exactly what I said. But then I learned that health insurance isn't even supposed to cover everything.
Wait, for real?
For real. Luckily, I had Aflac.
Aflac!
Get help with expenses health insurance doesn't cover.
Go Aflac!
Get to know us at aflac.com.
Hello again. Welcome to our panel, Own Organizational Inclusion, Eliminate Exclusion. We're extremely excited, extremely grateful to be able to introduce this panel to you today, covering topics that are extremely relevant, that affect both our personal and our organizational awareness of inclusion, and ultimately what it really means to execute that.
Yeah, and I mean, we couldn't have a better group of experts to dive deeper into these topics than what we have on our panel today. We are so excited. But before I turn it over to our moderator, I'll just quickly remind you of how to engage in today's session. On your session page, there's those pop-out icons on the right, the chat, the Q&A, whether that be the polls. You can engage with our panel today and really own your voice in this discussion. More importantly, for this session in particular, you'll see a couple of polls that are under the polls icon. We will not officially be discussing the results of these polls live with our panel, but more importantly, if you want to pop out there, answer those questions, we will kind of be doing more of a DIY kind of poll. So with that, we're interested in your viewpoint. We'll be sharing the poll results back with all of you. So thank you so much for engaging. Let's get started.
Yeah, let's do it. I think with that, I won't take up any more time. I'll turn it over to our moderator, Jaman. Let's go ahead and give them a warm virtual round of applause.
All right. Well, great to have. Thank you, Bridget and Ray. This is a great opportunity here to speak with such a great panel, and just looking forward to it. So my name is Jaman Harrell. I am an onboarding director here at Businessolver. But more importantly, I've been helping out with the D&I efforts that we're doing here. And today I want to introduce our panel as we dive into a good discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so bringing everyone to the forefront here, I want to first introduce Alicia Campbell. Alicia, are you on and ready to introduce yourself?
Having me, super excited to be here. It's going to be a great time.
Great, thank you, Alicia. And then next we also have Wendy. Wendy, would you like to introduce yourself now?
Hi, Wendy Rentschler here. I lead the Global Corporate Social Responsibility at BMC Software. I am a former HCM HR tech junkie, and I am so excited to be here today to engage in this discussion with two incredible people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy. And we are so looking forward to getting started with this conversation. One of the things I think we want to kind of start with is thinking about a common language. And so let's begin by aligning on that common language. And so if you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, too often they get used interchangeably to cover, say, a wide range of issues and topics. So we have this cloud, and I kind of want the audience to take a look at it and take a moment to look at the word in this cloud and consider the terms that you most closely associated with DE&I. Then we'd love to get kind of our thoughts from a poll. So you should see a poll pop up, and there aren't really any wrong answers, but our panel will help us find some of the ones that are most right in context of our discussion today. So hopefully you should see a slide pop up that kind of gives you a list of terms or topics in terms of expressing or talking about DE&I. So while that is coming up, I want to kind of throw my first question out to the group. So panel, when we think about the words, right, and we mentioned that they're used interchangeably, right? So sometimes they get mixed up, sometimes they are used separately, but I think what we want to is kind of level set on that. So thinking about from the exercise and the words, can we look at the various terms and say, what are some ways to help employers distinguish each term and apply them to the workforce efforts? So Wendy, I want to start with you with that question.
Yeah, so one of the things that I like to use to help people really remember what each of these terms can mean is diversity is a fact and inclusion is an act. Equity is something that is constantly evolving based on a person's circumstance to create an equitable opportunity for them, whether it's internal mobility, mother's rooms, or restrooms to be able to help them through a transition. Things like that are what create equity. Accommodations create equity. But I know that Alicia has some really great insights into equity and equality, and she'll bring it all together with belonging.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. It's really interesting when you actually break down these terms, because when you think about, as Wendy has said, when you break down diversity and inclusion, when you bring in the equity piece, a lot of individuals really don't understand the difference between equity and equality. They think it's one and the same, when actually it's quite different. And when you actually break down these two words, equal is, whatever I get, you get. It's the same across the board. But equity actually starts to look at the gaps that individuals might have and then tailor solutions and the needs of that individual based on what that gap is. So for me, maybe it's getting a different support system than what Wendy might need. But by understanding that my difference doesn't make it a bad thing, it's just a different thing, and then providing solutions that meet our needs in different ways to reach the same solution is where that equitable piece comes in. Because when we just say everybody is equal, we're actually purposely ignoring that there are differences here and that these differences are important and that we can't exclude them. And so that's how everything really all comes together within the DE&I piece. And when you get that in a really harmonious way, that's when you really start to create that culture of belonging. Because at that point, everybody is having an opportunity to speak. Everyone is able to feel included. Everyone has a solution that meets the gaps that they have. And then through that, you're creating a culture where all voices are heard, paid attention to, and really being considered and actioned. And so that's really a special place that we want all of our organizations to get to when we think about DE&I.
That is such a great point. And I love the way you said that equity, looking at the gap, right? And how do we get to that centerpiece from a belonging? And so we have a slide that kind of shows this together, where you have inclusion, equity, diversity, where they all converge into belonging. And I think that's the key, right? Is how do we get to the point to where we're not only included in what's going on, but we feel like we really belong to that organization. So I really like the way you guys pulled that together. Kind of bringing that full circle, kind of want to move on to doing the work. And this is kind of one of those areas that I think a lot of buzz has been going around, because doing the work looks different ways, right? You know, there's different actions that individuals have taken. There's different actions companies have taken. So kind of want to come out the gate right here. So Wendy, this is for you. So just kind of to address the elephant in the Zoom, right? Obviously, you've had to do the most self-work to culturally in this area. Based on your experience, what would you advise HR leaders to do in terms of self-work before moving forward with creating a D&I strategy?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think one of the biggest things that we can start to talk about is privilege. Everyone has privilege in different capacities, whether it's pedigree of your degree, connections that you have, generational wealth. And so I think that's first where you can start to look at yourself and take inventory. A second thing I think that's really important is to build any of this work foundationally, you have to have emotional intelligence. There's a really great book out by Talent Smart that helps you to start to understand emotional intelligence. So that way with your awareness, you can start to build on the other areas in the peripheral of diversity, equity, and inclusion space. I think another really great actual tool that anyone has access to today is to take the Harvard implicit bias test. There are over 15 tests that you can take to really understand like where your blind spots are and where you need to do some of that work. I also think it's really important to do things that make you uncomfortable. Go to webinars. Eventbrite has so many webinars. Like I live in an uncomfortableness all the time because I do diversity, equity, inclusion, philanthropic work, and sustainability. So everything is uncomfortable. But that's good because from that you grow. I think another thing I always say too is this work is like exercise. If it doesn't hurt, then you're probably not doing it right. And you have to do it every day. You're not going to get a 6-pack of abs by just doing 100, curls in like a day. You have to continually do it over time. So I think that's really important to make sure that you are challenging yourself. Go to Eventbrite, type in, maybe an affinity group that you don't have any experience with personally or professionally, and attend a webinar and show up and hear other people's experiences. I think that is the first step before you can really start to use those lenses to build a strategic DEI program internally.
Thank you for sharing, Wendy. And I think you bring up a very valid point about getting uncomfortable and going to that space. Alicia, knowing the work that you do, how do you advise companies from a consultant standpoint, right, on how to get uncomfortable? And Wendy mentioned something there that I think is real key for that is this idea of privilege, and that we all have privilege in some facet. And how do you kind of maybe tie those two together to help your companies and clients kind of work through that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think what's interesting, and to play on what Wendy was saying, is that recognizing that you have privilege. And I think that's where the first hurdle really comes in, because individuals don't want to recognize that we're flawed or that something that we have could be used in a bad way. And so we really need to get used to being uncomfortable, like what Wendy said, and really reflect and take a look at ourselves to say, okay, even though I may have privilege, how am I using that privilege? How am I using that to be a voice or an ally for other marginalized groups? And that's when you really start to see the changes come to life. And that's when you really start that's when the real work really starts to begin, because it's not just these marginalized groups and racialized groups speaking on their own voice, but then you have these people using their privilege and lending their privileges to these different issues. And that's when you really start to get some really great attention. When this past summer, we had the Black Lives Matter movement happening and the different rallies and the marches were going on, it was so incredible to see all different shades of skin colors in those types of environments, just coming together and being united. And it shows that it's not just a one group thing, but this affects all of us in all different capacities and all different ways. And so when you take yourself out of it and when you look at the bigger picture, you kind of have an aha moment where it's like, wow, like there's so much work that is even though beyond me, which can be scary, but I look at all these amazing people that I'm around to really make an incredible change with. And then driving that with your own learning journey and understanding allyship and understanding how to be able to really dig deeper in your own D&I journey is where you're going to really become a dangerous weapon in that space and be able to use your powers for good and really start to make incredible change in your organizations and in your community as well.
Oh, wow. Such a powerful statement there. And I agree with you. I think it was welcoming to see all and everyone together. But then it also allowed us to see that we still have work to do, right? That there's still more out there for us to do, but we know that there are others out there doing the work and kind of working through that. So, I mean, thank you for giving us both of your insights on that. Kind of want to move us to something, because I mean, we kind of touched on this. So we should have a slide up that has kind of what we saw happening on social media. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but when we're starting to see all the black squares go up, right? And, you know, like any workplace effort, you know, D&I initiatives can remain surface level. And if they're not executed in a way that's authentic to a company culture and or lacks accountability for people across all levels of the organization. And kind of, in other words, kind of just not posting these black squares, but then taking it to the next step. And I know for us here at Businessolver, I know when everything happened last summer, you know, all that was going on, and, you know, we were ensuring that we were getting involved, but then we knew we had to take it a step further, right? We couldn't just say, okay, we're raising the hand that we acknowledge, but we also needed to get in and start doing the work. And so we set up opportunities for ourselves to start getting educated, you know, start having listening sessions, start just hearing the stories and what's going on. You know, I think life has changed for a lot of us. And, you know, me being, say, a Black male, me going out in public is a little bit different than it used to be. You know, there used to be a point where you could just run to the store and not worry about anything. Whereas now there's that second look that you have to take. You know, if you do see something going on, it's like, am I coming home tonight? So I think as we kind of go through that, and we'd love to get, you know, either one of you to kind of weigh in on this, like, how do companies just get beyond that surface level, even if they're not really ready to go there yet?
Juan, thank you so much first for sharing that, you know, just small snapshot of your life, because I think that's like so important when companies are looking to build their strategy. You need to talk to your employees and understand that when I leave my house every day versus my Black sister-in-law leaving our same house every day, it's a completely different world in which we are approached and living in. And so I think that's first very important to have those type of discussions that you're talking about, where you bring people together and not target people, have an open invite where you bring people in. Don't subject your BIPOC employees to additional psychological trauma that they've been going over again. I think that it's important, like I said, to open it up to everyone. I know at the organizations that I've worked at and at BMC, we have a diversity speaker series to just kind of build awareness. I think awareness and education is really the first step. We have this diversity speaker series. Alicia has been a speaker. She has spoken at BMC on microaggressions, and also too at a previous employer, she did code switching. I think it's really important not to boil the ocean with these talks, like one thing at a time: intersectionality, privilege, code switching, microaggressions, unconscious bias, and start from the building blocks, like unconscious bias and understanding what bias is and why we are here today is really important, and then start to build on them with those additional topics. I also think it's really important as an organization that you already have probably several tools that you can start to mobilize for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I worked in benefits technology, and I know that like EAP is one of the most underutilized resources. 3 to 5% of EAP is utilized. Most organizations have these. So how can you, as a total rewards and an HR leader, take this and use it in a way and communicate it in a way in a multi-touch platform so that you get exposure to all of your employees through like financial literacy, helping your employees that might not have had generational wealth, through mental health awareness. Look at your benefit strategy, look at the programs that you have, and then look at the tech that you have, because everyone in HR tech now is got some sort of DEI add-on. And I don't think they're all like the most incredible tools, but you already have things in your arsenal that you can start to use and spin it in a different way towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the last thing that I'll add is I think it's really important with the EAP to make sure that you're highlighting your mental health resources, and that you're also socializing your benefits to your employee resource groups before you launch them. A lot of people that make decisions about benefits don't look like their employee population. Representation matters, and you need to get that third party voice on your benefits so that they make sense for everyone and they're inclusive of everyone. For example, mental health, 85% of mental health professionals are white. And as we want to get more BIPOC people to use mental health, we need to make sure that we are making offerings like Talkspace has an opportunity where you can just find African-American therapists. There is a difference in terms of having people hear your journey and understand your journey and not come into it with microaggressions, which Alicia is going to go over in a little bit. But also for your LGBTQ, do you have inclusive benefits around like paternal leave? These are all things that you have control over as that HR or total rewards leader that you can look at, and you can engage your communities and they can feel seen and feel heard.
Wow, thank you, Wendy. And you touched on a lot of good things there, and especially from an EAP standpoint. I think you're right, that is a very underutilized opportunity, especially when it comes to getting employees connected if they so desire to use that service. But more importantly, letting them know that it's available. And I know that, especially looking at it from an African-American community standpoint, there's always been a stigma around what that looks like. But I think with everything changing now, there's more appetite, I think, for those to want to seek those. But like you said, I need someone that knows what I'm going through and can understand kind of what that talking points are going to be, because that message is different, right? It's hard to say, let me throw something out to you, but wait, you probably have never experienced that. So how do I feel that you're going to give me something? Before we move off from that, Nisha, anything you want to kind of add just from like I said, consultant outside looking in, how would you say advise some of the clients to take those pieces that Wendy has kind of weaved together? Because again, technology and benefits go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I wish I could stand up and applaud Wendy, because I love listening to her speak on these things. We're honestly sisters in crime when it comes to this topic. Absolutely. Plus one, everything Wendy said. And I think when I work with my clients, it's so important that they really do take the time to look at the data, really look and really understand, like, what is it that we're trying to measure? Why is it that we're trying to address? And what are those gaps really telling us? And then from there, looking at the tools that you have, understanding the best way to utilize them for all the different employee groups, and then making those available. And it's not just making them available, but being able to communicate to them to say, this is how you use it, or this is going to be beneficial to you because of X, Y, Z. We can't, again, just take a paintbrush and brush everybody with the same stroke when it comes to mental health and when it comes to different literacies that we're trying to improve within our employee population. So really taking just those extra steps can literally move mountains for our employees, and you will see a tremendous increase in engagement, retention, and just overall innovation and happiness within your organization. So although it may seem like a little bit more work, the work is worth it, and you will definitely see a massive difference in your program uptake, in the engagement, and overall the belonging that you're trying to create.
Yeah, and I would love, can I add on to that? Because
yes,
I think that it's really important that we all understand the ROI of DEI. The largest cost to any organization is human capital. It's 70% on average. And as an HR leader working in HR technology, total rewards, our vision and goal collaboratively is to reduce turnover by elevating employee engagement with our tools and programs. And you always have to keep your eye on the prize when it comes to that. And that is how you can get buy-in from your organization around that. It is a cost. And to be able to elevate employee engagement, reduce turnover, create belonging, drives innovation. And that's how you become a thought leader in your industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the way you tie that in, because it brings us right back to where we started, right? The belonging piece of it. If we figure out how to get those pieces working together and we get to belonging, the world is kind of opens up to you on all the pieces that you get. And you two kind of touched on data. So I think this is really good for our next slide that we kind of want to talk about here. So we have a report that is hot off the press. and it was just released today. So our audience today is now not only getting a first look at the data, but kind of gets an expert analysis on it. So kind of want to get your opinions here. So this slide shows that for those organizations that do have DE&I strategies, they need to do a better job spreading the word. So how would you advise HR and benefit leaders to go about that? So awareness, but the important learning of D&I programs that go beyond minority employees, because it seems like the minority employees know about it, but how do we make sure it's beyond that? And so Alicia, I'll start with you on that question.
Yeah, I think what's so important is that when you're creating your D&I strategy, it does start with your minority employees, but remember, it's an organizational thing. And that's where we really start to see the breakthroughs happen, and when we really start to have these incredibly powerful conversations. Because if we are just talking to or advertising to one specific group, we're really just creating more exclusion, and that's not what we want to do. We want to start to bring others into the fold and bring others into the conversation, even though it might be uncomfortable. And so ways that I help to encourage this with my clients is I really get them to create talking circles or sharing circles where, as Wendy said, bringing in a diversity speaker series or someone that can speak to a topic and encourage others to maybe share or ask questions, because it starts to bring everybody on a similar playing field and just starts to bring down those walls a little bit, which can, be a little scary, but are so important if we're really going to start to move the needle within our organizations. And I think what's key as well is understanding that there's multiple layers to this. Like, it can be very overwhelming, and understanding that, like Wendy said, we're not trying to boil the ocean. We're really just trying to take this one step, one day at a time. And so what are the key areas based on where your organization is at? What are the things that we want to focus on this year? And then just create a plan around that, and then build on that for the following years. And making sure that you're including different areas of the business, different minority groups, making sure that you're including and expressing allyship in the conversation. That is going to be so key, not to only continue to have a D&I strong strategy in place, but in order to build camaraderie and in order to really build sustainability of all the work that you're doing year in and year out.
Absolutely. I know that makes perfect sense. And I think as you kind of work through it, Wendy, I want to kind of take a question to you here from an empathetic standpoint. So on our next slide, we kind of look at it that, workers at all levels believe D&I programs initiatives foster an empathetic work environment. So knowing that the work that you're doing at BMC, right, how can you kind of wrap that together on D&I efforts, and then perhaps what information is needed in order to note for our audience here that how that empathy plays into that?
Yeah, well, as Alicia was speaking to earlier about communicating, you've got to take it in phases. Like, we're not all going to wake up tomorrow and be woke. Like, I constantly have to work on this. We all do. I've been doing this my whole life, and I still slip up and I say you guys instead of you all or folks. And so I think the empty part comes in demonstrating allyship through leadership. So we have done a lot of culture. We've seen culture change happen when leaders are just being vulnerable and show, like saying, hey, I shouldn't say you guys, I should say you all. And this is why. And then they defer to the program. And it helps your employees become empowered to hold themselves accountable and be okay and not ashamed to do it, and then hold other people accountable. Empathetic leadership is so important, and it's essential. And it is what the market wants in terms of talent. We are always talking about the war for talent, and the new buying center of all the products that we sell, and the new candidate engagement that we have to do is towards, people that want to see good work from the organizations that they are doing businesses, working with, partnering with. So it's essential that you mobilize your managers and your HR business partners to be evangelists for empathetic leadership. Deloitte has a really great paper out about the 6 C's of inclusive leadership, and it really ties all the things that we think about when we think about empathy, curiosity, collectiveness. And I think it's really important too that your senior leaders and your executive leadership team, they pitch up and they come to the employee resource groups. And I don't think that they should come to the ones that they identify as an affinity. They should go to ones that they have nothing to do with that affinity, to learn more and gain awareness, because when they start to demonstrate that, then the middle management starts to follow suit. Middle management is where all of this goes to die if you do not get them on board. We've seen tech companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars with some performative work and some really incredible work, but they're not moving the needle internally. And that is because they are not doing the work inside first and then taking it outside. So, and then also too, to add on to the communication piece that you all were talking about earlier, I think it's important to remember that at some places there are 5 different generations working in the workplace. Right. I don't want a manifesto email. Send it to me in 140 characters or bullet points. So, but some people need mail. Send them a mail piece, email, text messaging. Also too, I know that some employees do not read your internal emails. So I talk about things on social media that are not proprietary to get engagement. You have to be creative. You have to be a marketer. And I encourage you to lean in on your marketing team to have ideation around how you can communicate these messages.
Oh, wow. And again, Wendy, I'm just loving the way you keep bringing us full circle about this belonging. It's like, how do we make sure we're including everyone in it and meeting them where they want to be met, whether it's a communication style. And I love what you said, where things could go to the diet middle management. I think we have all seen that happen in our careers, where the top is really ready for it, bottom might be ready for it, and then somewhere it just never made those meet. But I also would want to say to that as we talk about the empathetic leadership, let's make no mistake that that doesn't mean weakness, right? There's strength in that, and meaning that you can be vulnerable and still lead with the same dignity, same strength as an organization. That doesn't kind of make anyone less than. Because I think sometimes if we start using words like that folks start to think back, well, am I still going to be considered the leader? More so than you think.
Your employees will work harder for you than they've ever worked in their life when you start to bend your ear and you really care.
Right. Absolutely.
You see that. Any organization that's doing this well, and there's not a lot, so don't be sad, if you don't work at one. It's because they are really empowering their leaders,
right,
to be empathetic. And to your point, people need to turn in their deliverables, but it's no longer an 8 to 5 situation. Like Ramadan is right now. I have employees that are fasting. They work at different times of the day. That doesn't bother me. Like I'm not going to manage them by a Skype light. That is very antiquated. Right. I am, managing my employees by lending an empathetic ear, supporting them through something that's extremely important to them, and then making, giving them deliverables with reasonable due dates. And I think that that's really important, and that is empathy.
Absolutely. Well, I want to jump to a really big topic, because I think we've been waiting to get to this one here. And let's talk about microaggressions. And we'll start there, because I know throughout the last year and a half, there's been a whole lot of terms, I think, thrown out there in between microaggressions, intersectionality, all these big terms that some of us have not necessarily dug a lot into. And hopefully everyone has been doing their education. But to kind of start here, and Misha, this is going to be your wheelhouse here, so we're going to definitely let you kind of go into it. Even when best plans, right? So you have best execution, and when the best of intentions, but people will stumble. And so when we think about this buzz term of microaggressions, I'm going to throw a whole lot of questions, and I'm just going to let you run with it, Alicia.
Sounds good.
When we think about microaggressions, what I think I want to learn from you is, what are they? For those that kind of need to be re-educated there, how do we identify them? And then how do we call them out when, in a professional way, assuming positive intent, and that's the key word there. And then finally, how do we make it right with our colleagues when, unintentionally happens? So a lot of big questions unpacked there, and I suppose we're going to spend a little bit of time here. So definitely take your time.
Yes, absolutely. And I may ask you to repeat 1 or 2 of those, because I want to make sure we're adjusting it right. So absolutely, I think what's really important, and like you said, what are microaggressions? And when we actually break down the word, we're actually looking at, everyday slights or indignities that affect minority and marginalized groups. And so this can show in a variety of ways. It could be meeting somebody who could be Southeast Asian, and you meet them for the first time, and you say, wow, you speak really great English. So even though you think you're complimenting someone, you're assuming that because they don't look like they would be from the States, that they might be, not very good at speaking the English language. So when you think of that example, or when you think about, say, you're seeing an African American walk down the street and you maybe clutch your bag a little bit closer to your body when you walk past them, that is a microaggression. And so we think that others don't see this, or that others don't hear or see our body language, but they do. And so that's where it really becomes dangerous, because we're doing these small actions unknowingly. And and a lot of the times unknowingly, which I'll get to in a second. But it's interesting, because when we think about unconscious bias, it manifests itself in one way through microaggressions. And so we have to understand that when we don't start to look at our bias, we have to ensure that we're looking to see, okay, what is really the issues here? And how can we really start to, take those actions and really start to make those amends, like you were asking. And so with that, we need to ensure that we're really understanding the effects of microaggressions. And I think one great stat to understand is that 60% of Americans in the workforce have either witnessed or potentially witnessed a microaggression. And that's pretty significant. And when you think about these day in and day out comments, actions towards racialized groups, this takes a toll mentally, physically, and these are not things that just go away in a day. But when you think about someone who could possibly have multiple interactions throughout their 9 to 5, and how many of those could be microaggressions, that is a massive amount of trauma that somebody could be going through over and over again in a single day. And Wendy says this so greatly. She talks about how with microaggressions, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. And that's what it literally is like when you think about these types of comments or actions that are put towards our racialized groups within our workforce. And with that, we have to think about retention. 50% of Americans that have experienced microaggressions are looking to leave their jobs because it's just too much of a toll and stress on their daily life. And then when we think about that, then we have to think about the cost of rehiring those talents in the workforce, which could be up to 33% of their salary. And so the numbers are just massive when it comes to something that to us, we may not even be aware of, number one, or number two, in our eyes may not seem like a big deal. These types of actions can have massive repercussions. And so great that we're really digging into this topic, because that's when we really start to understand, okay, how can I now start to be aware of this, and what do I do to start to ensure that if I do something, how to, rectify it. And so with anything like we've been talking about, I think on this panel, we need to make sure that we are not avoiding the uncomfortable areas. We need to learn about unconscious bias. We need to learn more about microaggressions and how they can show up in the workplace, in our community, in our relationships, and really understand where our own biases lie. And that's going to be really key, because until you start to look inwards and start to understand what your own biases can be, then you're not going to be able to really make those intentional actions to not do those moving forward. And the key word there is intentional, because we have unconscious biases from the moment our brain starts to develop, in adolescence ages. And so when we think about that, we have a lot of unlearning to do and a lot of relearning to do, which takes time. And like Wendy said, it's something we have to do day in and day out. We can't take a break from it. We need to consciously and intentionally be able to understand what is it, the biases that I could be developing, and how can I start to, make sure that I'm not, leaning in or using that lens to look at different situations. And I think it's key as well, going into your question about how do we start to address those microaggressions, is we need to acknowledge if we said something to someone, if we spoke out of turn, apologize, let them know that that was not the intention that you made. And then if you're the one experiencing microaggression, it's important that you let the person know what they said or the effect that it had on you, because we need to keep each other accountable in this space. And that's what's super important, because we need to understand that when we say microaggressions, it affects the other person. And when we don't let the other person know that they have said a microaggression, we're not helping to educate them. So we can ask them simple questions like, are you aware of kind of what you just said, or how that may have come across? Because what did you mean when you said X, Y, Z? How did you intend for that to be, to be said or to be discussed? And those types of questions will make them pause and think and be like, okay, what did I say or what did I do that isn't coming across the way that I intended to. So by just asking those very simple things, and obviously, of course, a professional and respectful way, one, you're letting the person know that, maybe they said something they shouldn't have said. And then two, you're opening up a dialogue of discussion so that you're able to teach them, you're able to share, and you're really able to start to build those layers of trust, which is really important. And it's important that within this whole process, we're not getting defensive, which is usually our number one tactic to go to. So we really need to just take that deep breath, refocus on the situation, and know that anything that is said in this regard is not meant for any ill intent, but it's to help educate and to inspire for better actions moving forward.
Absolutely. And Wendy, I'm gonna have you chime in.
Microaggressions in 4 minutes. There you go. I mean, she just nailed it succinctly, articulately. Love it. And I love that she said intentional, pause, and think. Bias, just like our wisdom teeth, are from prehistoric time, like not prehistoric times, but thousands and thousands of years ago. And it's taking time. We're like computer software for the updates to happen. We don't need our wisdom teeth anymore to chew chewy root vegetables. We don't need our bias that much anymore because we're not, don't need to know the difference between a house cat and a tiger. But it is something that you constantly have to work on, and you just have to do like the self work. So, but what was your question?
Yep. So I'm gonna have you weigh in on the question, but I want to bring what Alicia said to life. We have a video that'll show that I think will bring that whole conversation into one kind of succinct way, and then I'm gonna kind of follow up with you after that, Wendy. So let's cue the video.
Hi, Joe. Sorry I'm late for the call. I had a perfect morning, had to catch the last set.
You surf?
Yeah, I'm at Ocean Beach pretty much all the time. You?
Totally. We'll have to go when I'm up there next week.
Hey, I'm stoked. Epic.
Are you John? Joe? Oh, yeah. Great to meet you. I totally had your picture different in my head. Oh, really? Yeah, but, anyways, can I get you a cup of coffee?
Yeah, sure.
My hair looks crazy. It looks like a mess.
I don't believe it. Your hair always looks awesome. I mean, how do you do it? Do you twist it? Do you do it yourself?
Yeah, I twist it myself.
Oh. I mean, do you mind? Oh.
Yeah, actually, I do mind.
Oh, sorry.
But I mean, if you're really curious about it, there are like tons of YouTube videos out now about natural hair, so maybe check that out.
There's no way we were gonna make it to that date.
No. I have no idea what they were thinking. What are you doing this weekend?
Going to the beach with some buddies.
So those some moments there. And so like I said, kind of brought that to life. And I don't know if any of you have cringed when you saw some of those as you kind of gone through it. It's funny because I can definitely relate to the last one, not anymore because all the hair is gone. But prior to that, in those younger days, there was an opportunity that there was a fascination with hair and just why it did what it did. And so I think as we kind of go through that, when in our last few minutes, as we kind of get to the wrap up here, from an organization standpoint, I know that you've had Alicia come in and talk about microaggressions, but from your perspective, how are you as an organization kind of addressing those things and helping equip your employees to have those conversations, right? To be able to speak up and speak out?
Well, I will say COVID has not been a benefit for a myriad of reasons, but we all have bigger bubbles. We don't touch each other anymore. So that's great. I'm gonna see the silver lining in that cloud. I'm like, I need a 6-foot bubble. But I think that in terms of microaggressions and how you do education around it is, if it's happening to you and you have privilege or power that you can say something. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say that probably weekly. I say, would you say that to me if I was a man? With being a woman, emotional or your tone might have been aggressive. And then when I say, someone recently had mentioned a scenario to me and I said, but would you say that about this person if they were a man? And they were like, you know what? Absolutely not. That's a fact. And, so I think it's just those small little micro events that lead to macro change. And I think that that's what's really important. Every webinar you attend, diversity speaker series, podcast you listen to, book you read, builds on that collective consciousness of psychological safety, which is so important. And we talk about that in like our diversity speaker series. And we have, as I mentioned earlier, everyone learns in different ways. So we have the diversity speaker series, and it goes to a global audience of 6,000 employees. We typically have people anywhere from 500 to 1,400 come to the live events, and then another of the same amount watch the replays. And that is substantial change, like that is substantial information. And I think sometimes too, practitioners in our space might get frustrated, but if someone's worked somewhere for a long time and they haven't had exposure and the algorithms of their lives aren't exposing them to this type of content, they don't know what they don't know. So give people grace, but also to challenge them and give them other opportunities. We also have an app called Diversity Pop. It's an incredible app. I know a lot about HR tech. I go to HR tech every year. It's probably one of the best apps I've seen in a long time around microlearning and DEI. And that is a really great way to connect with folks that maybe don't want longer, building awareness 4 minutes at a time, 2 times a week, maybe. So just be programmatic, intentional, and then give people empowerment to hold others accountable and demonstrate that through example.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably the perfect way to wrap us up, Wendy. Just bring it all together using the tools that we have and kind of go through it. It's been an honor to talk, and we could talk about this for hours. And I hope that we get an opportunity to do this again, because I think there's so much. We've only scratched the surface of kind of what this has. And like you said, we all have the work to do. So again, appreciate spending this time with you. I think one thing I would leave the audience and everyone with, and hopefully you two agree, would be that continue to educate yourselves, continue to reach out. Don't be afraid to ask those questions and know that you're not doing it alone. And so with that, Ray, Bridget, I'm going to throw it back over to you. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, you guys, thank you so much for the time this morning. I can't even begin to tell you what I learned, what I'm continuously learning. To Jamon's point, it's the continued education that's really important for us as individuals, and to really own it in our organizations and bring that broader macro improvement that you said. It's going to be those micro moments that we take and really continue to engage. So thank you, Jamon. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Alicia. Just great insight. And thank you for being a part of this. Let's go ahead and give them a virtual round of applause. They've definitely earned it.
All right, a couple of quick reminders here. So first and foremost, as a reminder, you do have the opportunity to go out and visit those virtual booths. It's a great time to be able to do that. The other thing we wanted to remind you of is that the recordings of the sessions are made available along with the content about 30 minutes to an hour after the session ends. So you'll be able to find this great information there. I know there were a number of questions about that, a number of comments in the chat. A couple of just quick reminders on the prizes if you're going out and you're visiting those virtual exhibitors. I'm particularly excited about the AirPods that our friends at Aflac are offering. There's some really great Amazon cash from Allstate Benefits, Allstate Identity Protection, MetLife, Lincoln Financial Group, Transamerican, Securian. They clearly got the notice that everyone's having stuff shipped to their house right now. So thanks again to those sponsors. Thanks again to all of you. We'll see you soon. Be well.